Welcome. In this video, this is part 7, I think, part 7 to our Galaxy Defiance space shooter tutorial series. I hope you're enjoying the series so far. In this video, we're going to be setting up the hitboxes and hurtboxes for our enemy. So let's come into our enemy scene. This is the scene that all of our enemies inherit from. We want to add hurtboxes and hitboxes to it because all of our enemies will have a hurtbox and a hitbox, or at least most of them will. If we have an enemy that doesn't, we wouldn't inherit from this scene. I've already created some hurtbox and hitbox components. Again, this series is a combination of some written content and video content. So you'll need to go into the components and look at the hurtbox and hitbox components if you want to read more and learn more about how I've set those up and how I've set up the code. They're essentially area 2Ds, which are they're area 2D nodes, which are a way for Godot to detect overlap between two things. And I've just added a little bit of extra logic to them to handle invincibility and damage and stuff like that. So on our enemy here, we'll add a new hurtbox node, or hurtbox component. Make sure you get the hurtbox component and not the hurt component. So we're setting up the hurtbox component, and then we're going to set up the hitbox component as well. This enemy will have both of those, and then we're going to drag them into the script on our enemy. Make sure you're not in green enemy. Make sure you're in enemy. We'll call this hurtbox component as hurtbox component, and hitbox component as hitbox component. Now that we've got those set up, one of the things we can do is we can connect our hurtbox component .hurt signal to a function. So we'll say hurtbox component .hurt .connect. We're going to connect this to our own anonymous function, and we can do this just by calling func like this and adding the colon after it, and then returning to get our parentheses down here. And then we can say scale component dot tween scale. And well, actually for now, let's just call Q free. Q free. We'll do that other stuff in a second. Okay. Okay, so our enemy has a hurtbox component on it now, but it's going to need, so you can see there's this little warning sign here, and the warning says this node has no shape. So an area 2D node inside of Godot has to have a shape associated with it. Otherwise, it won't know how to detect overlap. So come into our green enemy, and we're going to define this shape on our green enemy. And that's just because all of our enemies might not all have the same shape for their hurtbox. So if they did, we could do it inside of our enemy template. But since they don't, we're going to do it inside of the green enemy specifically and each subsequent enemy. Let's add a new collision shape, and we'll just do, for this green enemy, we'll just do a circle. And we'll have the hurtbox be about that big. Now let's do our hitbox. This will be the hurtbox is what the enemy takes damage with, and the hitbox is what the enemy could hit the player with. So let's add a collision shape here, and we'll do a new circle shape. And I'm going to turn off snap, and I'm going to make this one smaller, like about that size. That way there's a little bit of leniency for the player to be able to avoid this enemy. Like if they just barely touch the tentacle here, then they won't actually die from it. But the hurtbox is bigger because that makes it easier to hit the enemy with a laser. Now, an important part of creating our hurtbox and hitbox system and the collisions associated with it inside of Godot are the collision layers. And this is a more advanced topic, but inside Godot, you can put any sort of collision node onto a collision layer and on a collision mask and set it to look at a collision mask. So we're going to come into our project settings, and if you scroll all the way down to layer names, you can see 2D physics here. We're going to create some layer names to more easily set these collision layers and collision masks. So we'll do a base world layer. I tend to just have layer 1 be like world in most of my projects, although in this one, admittedly, we probably don't need that. Like the more I think about it, yeah, in this project, we actually don't need the world layer. So we'll just do a player Hurtbox layer for layer 1. And then for layer 2, we'll do an enemy Hurtbox like this. Now, the reason we don't have to do hitbox layers as well is because our hitboxes will just target the Hurtbox layer, okay? Now we can come into our enemy, and its Hurtbox component should be on the enemy Hurtbox layer, okay? So I turned off the mask 1, I turned off the layer 1 on our Hurtbox component, and I just set its Hurtbox to layer to the enemy Hurtbox. Now when we come into the hitbox, we're going to turn off the ones that are there by default. And we're going to set the hitbox to target mask player Hurtbox. So this is how layers and masks work in Godot. The layer is the layer that it is on, and the mask is the layer that it is targeting. So our hitbox targets, that's why we're using mask, the player Hurtbox. And then our Hurtbox exists on, that's why we're using layer, the enemy Hurtbox layer. Okay? Now let's come into our laser. And we're going to add a hitbox component to our layer, to our laser. And this hitbox component is going to have an area 2D, or not an area 2D, a collision shape. And we'll set it to be just a little rectangle, right? We'll set the rectangle. Oops, I'm moving it. That's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Okay, so we've set it up. Now this hitbox component on our laser, it needs to target something. And so we come into collision, and it doesn't have to be on a layer, it's a hitbox. And we don't want it to target the player's Hurtbox, we want it to target the enemy Hurtbox. So we'll set its mask to enemy Hurtbox. And its damage will just be 1. Again, if you were to add different types of lasers, you could manipulate the damage. Now, when we come back to our green enemy, we want to check to make sure that we inherited the correct layer, and we did. Okay, on our Hurtbox and hitbox. There were some bugs around this, so I want to double check here. Let's come into our world scene here, and we'll just test to see if it works, and then we can check these enemies to make sure that they correctly inherited that as well. So our enemy, when it's hurt, it just frees itself. And it will get hurt when the laser's hitbox component comes into contact or overlaps the enemy's Hurtbox component. That's when hurt will fire out, and we just free it. So let's see if this works. And it doesn't work, and we're getting an error message. So I was actually expecting this. So we're getting this error message. It says, hitbox component on Hurtbox entered can't get method callable anonymous, whatever. And then it has the same thing, error calling from signal hurt to callable method expects 0 arguments but called with 1. Okay. So that error message is a little hard to understand, and part of the reason that I intentionally did this wrong was to show this error message because it is hard to understand. So what's happening here is If you click on our Hurtbox here and you come up to node, you can see that the hurt signal actually has an argument here. And inside Godot, if you ever connect a signal to a function and the arguments don't match between that signal and that function, then Godot will throw an error to you. Now you can unbind that argument. That's a more complicated topic that we'll go into in this series actually. But for now, let's just make it match. So it's expecting a hitbox. So we'll set our function to have a hitbox as well. Hitbox component. Now we're just passing in that information. Now let's see if it works. And now it does work correctly. Our enemy is getting destroyed. However, the lasers don't actually destroy themselves. And we want them to. So let's come to our laser. And we're going to connect to the hitbox. Oh, we need to get access to it. So let's grab our hitbox component, drag it in here, and we'll say hitbox component as hitbox component. And then we can connect here. We can say hitbox component dot hit hurtbox dot connect, and then we can call q free. Got to delete our parentheses so we don't have extras, and run the game. Now we're gonna have a similar issue here. Oh no, the lasers didn't destroy themselves, and oh no, we're getting this weird error message again, right? Error calling from signal. Q free method expects 0 arguments but called with 1. We're getting the same issue again. That is because the hit hurtbox expects a hurtbox value. And I said later we would talk about unbinding arguments, but this is actually a really good spot to introduce it, so I'm just going to do it here anyways. Q free doesn't take any arguments, right? So we can't change how Q free works, but what we can do is unbind this argument that is getting passed in. So what we'll do is, instead of just calling Q free, we'll call Q free. Instead of just having Q free here, we'll have Q free.unbind, and then you tell it how many arguments to unbind. And we're going to unbind 1 because there's only 1 argument being passed in. If there were 2 and we wanted to unbind both of them, we would do 2. Okay, so that's definitely tricky. But now, if our lasers collide with the enemy, they get destroyed as well. So that's going to be it for this video. We just set up the basics for our hitbox component and our hurtbox component. There's still more work to be done with this to improve how this looks, to take advantage of our stats. We'll be doing that in a later video. I don't want this one to last too long. If you find this series helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. If you are interested in taking my courses, I have a Godot course that is currently on sale on my website. There'll be a link in the description. Pretty heavily discounted for a fall sale, so check that out if you're interested. Thanks so much for the support, and I will see you all in the next video.